Now then, you're welcome along. So we are talking rugby, a sure sign that the autumn is here and the clocks are going back because Rory O'Connor's here. Rory, hello.
Hello, Joe.
And if Ian Madigan's here, it's really serious. Hello.
Yeah, excited for the start of the season.
When does it start? Week after next.
Friday week.
Friday week.
Although with the Women's World Cup, it hasn't really ended.
Well, there is that. Yeah, never stops. So we're going to just go around the house and chat about a few different things. The Rugby Championship obviously means it's really continuing as well as the World Cup. Our rugby coverage as ever with thanks to Energia. They sponsor rugby in Ireland at all levels, at grassroots with the AIL. They're official energy partner to the Leinster, Connacht and Irish men's and women's teams. And their Rugby for All initiative welcomes everyone of all abilities to participate in the game. Energia.ie/rugby is the place to go for exclusive energy offers for rugby fans. On the quarter-final scene, as you mentioned it, Rory, the news is in that the biter, Axel Berthomeu, has received a 12-match ban for biting Aoife Wafer. I suppose what's more kind of galling as the days go by and you realise what a bad miss this was by the referee and team. It turns out, so Sam Monaghan confirmed afterwards, she specifically asked the referee, Amy Barrett-Theron, to review the bite. Barrett-Theron heard discussing it with the TMO Ian Tempest. But World Rugby, when reviewing how it was missed, they said the Tempest was, quote, unable to determine clear and obvious foul play.
Yeah. I don't remember a bite ever leading to a red card. They've, I think, always been picked up in review. But I also have never seen such clear evidence. You know, when you look at it the first time, you're like, there's only one thing that's happening there. So an experienced television match official in Ian Tempest, who does major men's games, referees in the Premiership, as Will said yesterday, we trust that he went and looked at it. It was up on the big screen. All the Irish players were pointing at it. The BBC showed it twice. I didn't actually spot it myself at the time because my head was down in copy. And they gave us ref links through our phones, but the Wi-Fi was in and out, so I didn't actually hear the exchange. But obviously, I was online and became aware of it quite quickly. To me, there was enough evidence in the footage that I saw that you would certainly give a review yellow card and send it up to the bunker. And to me, it's a straight red. Like people will say 20-minute red, but like that was 38 minutes with 14 players in a World Cup quarter-final. At the time, I don't think France had even scored their penalty, so I think it was still 13-0. It may have been 13-3. So the Irish players have good reason to feel very aggrieved about this, because even the second one, no one has identified which tackle the France captain should have been sent off for, but they've identified a high tackle by the France captain, who was already on a yellow card from the first half. So they should have been down to 13 players at one stage, and the 3 yellows as it was. So it's like Ireland had enough chances within the game as it was to win it, and will have big regrets about what they did. But you would expect better in a World Cup quarter final, and the fact that she's been handed a 12-week ban and accepted culpability herself, she owned up to it, agreed that it was an act of foul play, and isn't repealing it, unlike her captain, Falou. I think it's a big miss, and it's one that the Irish players. We're at the last World Cup. Who knows what things will be like in 4 years' time? Who'll still be around? This was a big opportunity that passed them by, and they'll take ownership of their own attacking flaws and the fact they couldn't break France down. But also they'll look at that and go, "Hang on, we could have had a much easier ride in that second half."
Yeah. I think for me on that, there's a couple of things that can happen on a rugby pitch that actually condone stopping a game. And for me, there are 3 things. One is eye gouging. 2 is intentionally injuring a player. Very rarely see it, but maybe getting someone in an arm lock and trying to blow their elbow out. And the third one is biting. And for a player to come to a referee and potentially show bite marks and say, "I've been bitten," that for me condones stopping the game for a period of time, and that can be 5 minutes. It's very different to a player coming and saying, "I got hit late off the ball," or "I got hit high," or "there's head contact there." And there is a lot of that in rugby now, and it's something that I feel that the game needs to get on top of, because we saw it nearly got out of control in the Australia-Argentina game at the weekend. And the issue with that is when something actually really matters like this, the referee is still in the mindset of, I want to keep this game moving. But that should have been a red card, and I actually think 12 weeks isn't long enough. That the player who bit Aoife Wafer there, I think it should be a 6 to 12 month ban. That's out of control. And look, I understand you want to win, and it's like a golfer playing at the weekend and they can't help themselves cheating. She could not help herself cheating, but that not only is breaking the rules, you're putting someone's health at risk.
Yeah,
I think that 61-minute first half, possibly, I don't have any evidence of this, but the fact that the first half lasted 61 minutes and there was another semi-final happening down the road, quarter-final happening down the road that afternoon, she may have been under pressure or felt under pressure to get the game going again because she really brushed past it. It was brought to her attention by the Ireland captain. I think what Aoife Wafer really needs to do is take a knee. I think this is a big moment for this team and these something they'll learn from. Aoife Wafer needs to go on one knee. I've been bitten. I need medical attention. Sam Monaghan needs to be like, we're not playing on until you look at this. You have to look at this. Our player's been bitten. She's been captain for a couple of seasons, but maybe that side of things just didn't come. Maybe, it's when has she ever been presented with a scenario where one of her players has been bitten? I mean, this World Cup has been quite a friendly tournament between the teams, and suddenly we get to the quarter-final stage and it's not TikTok dancing anymore, it's biting. It was so jarring an occurrence. I remember it was a Munster game, I think it was either the start of last season or the year before, where Niall Scannell was alleged to bite and Peter O'Mahony went to the referee, and they did, and Peter O'Mahony, being the experienced captain that he is, managed to get it reviewed. Now, Andrew Brace, I think, was the referee, said, I don't have evidence to do this here, but they'll deal with it afterwards. And that's fair enough. Like, if they don't have the evidence, but I think between Wafer's arm and what we saw on the BBC, or on the official television feed, I think there's enough, but certainly there should have been enough within the accusation to stop the game. And I think if Wafer takes the knee and starts going, I need medical attention, and the Irish medics run on and the coaches come on, because you can see Beeman, who tried to deflect, but he's shouting and roaring up in the press box or in the coaches box. He's clearly going, we need to deal with this, but it's just brushed past, and it never, even Monaghan never goes back, as far as I'm aware, and says, what's the story there? Did you get checked? And I don't remember the referee going to Ian Tempest and saying, Can I get an update on this? So it was never clarified. So it was a bit of a missed opportunity. But it's really not on the injured player. But sometimes they have to milk it a little bit to try and get the attention. It's like someone going down in the area in football, or we've seen players milk head contacts to try and get it noticed by the referees. And I'm not big on it, but I think sometimes you got to just stop the game. And if the ref's not going to stop it, you got to find a way of stopping it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think part of it is the skill as a captain. If you appeal for every knock on, every off the feet, every offside, you can lose the referee, and that happened with Wilson at the weekend in the Australian game. Or if you're a captain who's patient and bides their time, but when you go to the referee has an understanding that there's probably something in this. Maybe I should refer this to the TMO, and yeah, that was the nature. Look, it's quarter-final rugby at the same time. It's very difficult not to appeal for everything because you're so desperate to win.
Yeah. So it promises to be an interesting season on a host of levels in Irish rugby. We'll have plenty of time to talk international rugby, but the clubs are back in action Friday week, as you say, Rory. Start with Munster, because Conor Murray was in here with you on Friday and spoke very honestly about almost a lost decade. You know, his book is a love letter to Munster in many ways, if people haven't read it. But there is, as the final curtain comes down and the realisation hits that it's over, there is a great sense of frustration. There's a great sense of missed opportunity. People should go back and listen to the interview and, of course, get the book as well. But he detailed any number of frustrations. The turnover of coaches, obviously, is a huge bugbearer for that team. A bit of penny pinching in terms of logistics and just high performance, recruitment. You know, he in the book talked about his friend giving him a list of 50 players that had been signed over the decade, and Murray said, yeah, there's some good ones there, but he said he was kind of struck by the number of duds. Duds is his word. And now it's done. And he is, I think, the first player of that generation to speak up so vociferously. Were you surprised he did it? What you make of it? He hasn't made a habit throughout his career of speaking this way, which maybe makes it all the more impactful.
Yeah, I was a little surprised. But when I delve deeper into the comments he was making, I do agree with them on some of them. The changing over of coaches is a big one, and I think that's a big frustration because, look, players, we're creatures of habit, heading back in for a pre-season, and then suddenly there's a culture change and we're focusing on different things, whether it's our running, our gym work, the actual strategy on the pitch, how the season is being themed. If that is changing every year, every couple of years, you just lack that continuity. As regards the signings, they've had some very good signings, but that's within those 50 players. There's probably 40 that he's referring to there that haven't been good enough. But for me, I actually think Munster's biggest downfall over the last 10 years is their inability to produce their own. And you look at the Munster legends of like Zebo, O'Mahony, Earls, Murray, Flannery, O'Connell, and there's loads of others, but there haven't been enough produced by Munster in the last 10 years for them to be a top 3-4 side in Europe consistently. And I think for Munster looking forward, it's those players that are mid-20s now, the likes of Casey, Crowley, Coombs, Ahern, Nash, Nankerville, that need to step up. And for Munster to have a successful season, I think it's those mid-20 players that are going to carry Munster and get them back to the top table that we know that they can be at. But I would say that Murray has to take some responsibility there himself. Maybe the senior players haven't nurtured the talent that is there well enough. Maybe the talent's just not there.
I was down at his book launch. I was hosting it at Thomond Park, and Keith Earls was on the panel as well. And there was, part one was Murray talking to myself, and then Earls and Zebo joined us on stage. And there was definitely a moment where I think Earls almost taking the lead from Murray said, okay, well, look, if we're talking about this. And he put forward a lot of frustrations as well. And what bugged him almost, the coaching aspect in particular, that sense of always being in transition, that sense of a new pre-season under yet another coach. He was like weary the way he was talking about it. He'd sit there and say, okay, what's the culture buzzword with this guy? And then we're all we're gonna be this. And then a year or two goes by. Oh, now we're gonna be this. And just like, big regret I think that generation have now. And I suspect they'll all in their own way, be it books or interviews over the next 5, 6, 7 years, talk about it. Just a big sense of we did not maximise what we had.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, I think it's good. It's healthy for these former players to voice what they feel is wrong, because if you're outside the Munster tent and you make these comments, you get pelters. And I know Murray's getting pelters from some of the Munster fandom for coming out and saying what he said, and from the kind of Munster blogger world. There's a whole little mini media market down there where they kind of close ranks and they don't like when people criticise the organisation. And I think you have to be open to someone of that status saying what he said. I think it's pretty brave. And I know there's a criticism that really it's not the RFU or it's not Munster who are penny pinching. It's the RFU's constraints around Munster's budget, the debt over Thomond Park, the fact that they tried to sign some players and the RFU blocked it over the years. But I think you have to embrace your former players and your legends. And I've spoken to a couple of the kind of great team of the 06-08 generation who feel completely disenfranchised with Munster now, who don't recognise the province that they feel that they massively contribute to building. And I don't think Munster do enough to keep that cabal, that WhatsApp group kind of involved. And even Murray saying as a current player he was never asked about a signing. That's so jarring to hear. And they got unlucky with some signings over the years. I mean, Orgy Simon never played for them really. Like, he kind of missed, the 3 or 4 seasons he was there, he missed most of them. Tyler Blaindale was coming over with a massive reputation as a number 10. He picks up a neck injury just before he arrived. He was never the same player again. And when Razzie was there for the season he was there, he got Blaindale fit and firing to as best as his ability, and he looked like a really good player. But we never really saw that again. The churn. I mean, I'd say Clayton McMillan is just looking at this going, here, like, I'm not even in the door, and there's just this Munster thing, is the kind of question marks with nothing to do with him, but he's going to be asked about Murray's comments. Or he already has been. He was after their pre-season game at the weekend. So there's already kind of an in to kind of criticise Munster or to kind of ask questions and to even what Ian's saying there. I'm sure Clayton McMillan's trying to instill his stuff, and you've got senior players who've heard it all before, and they don't know how long he's going to be there. So it's, I guess what they need to drill into is what Munster stand for, what Munster should be, because they've been lurching from one thing to another for the last 10 years. When they were at their best, there was a very clearly defined sense of what Munster are.
Yeah.
And they have a new start, but they have a weaker squad.
Well, well, they do. You can sort of forget how dysfunctional last season was in many ways. I mean, they lost their coach unexpectedly, a month in? You know, last season's a mess from that perspective. In the end, they finished 6th in the URC, lose to the Sharks in the quarterfinals on penalties, very memorably, all the controversy around the penalties. I suppose in Europe, there was still that reminder of the DNA. You know, you just see Mick Galway on a tractor in La Rochelle and you know that they're going to win somehow. Like, there still is that. And they do. And then it's obviously, you know, just a weak turnaround for Bordeaux is too much. So they bow at the quarterfinals. But respectfully, when you beat La Rochelle in that fashion, it just adds a certain something to the campaign. So now they start with a new coach in McMillan. Do we have any strong sense of what he's going to bring in terms of playing style yet, or demeanour yet? Too early to say, I presume.
Yeah, like the initial murmurings out of the camp is really tough pre-season, you know, both on the conditioning side, and that's strength and conditioning and running. So he's obviously looking to get them fit, which gives you an indication of the style of play that we're going to see. It's mad to think back to last season, and Benetton were an intercept away from Munster not being in the Champions Cup this year, and that very nearly happened. Yeah. But they still had the big scalp against La Rochelle, and look, for them, they've got to be more competitive. Like that round 4 game against Leinster is a really that's the start of the McMillan coaching ticket, because they just haven't been competitive in that Interpro fixture over the last 3 years, barring the semi-final that they won.
It always feels like a very damaging loss for morale there as well. It's not just a loss against any other side in the league. You feel when they lose to Leinster and lose comprehensively, there's about 2 weeks of soul searching. It's very chastening. You know, in GAA, David Clifford scores a point. It's worth 2. Obviously, sometimes it is worth 2. But, you know, you take my meaning. Losing to Leinster in comprehensive fashion always feels very damaging for them. There's like I said, 2 weeks of media talk and introspection and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, because look, it gets the hype that it deserves. The biggest rivalry in Ireland, and you fill out Croke Park for the one last year. The reality is that game was over after 20 minutes. Yeah. And then, you know, Leinster traditionally struggled to go down to Thomond at Christmas time. They've won that game comfortably the last few years. I think what McMillan needs to do is he needs to get the identity back. It chopped and changed last year. And then who are the key guys in that team that he's got to rely on? And it's Casey and Crowley. They have a great halfback partnership that are 2 guys that are going to be really hungry, that they want to put their hand up for the starting slots with Ireland. And they're coming into their prime now. So, you know, at least they've got that. But they are light in certain positions. You know, like Archer retiring. You know, and you look at that front row. I know Lee Barnes a good signing at hooker.
We're talking about the front row for a decade at this stage.
Yeah. But like since Jerry Flannery, there hasn't been a marquee hooker signing for Munster, and it's such an important position for how they play the game. And yeah, so I just think their pack is still a bit light to be competing at that top level in European rugby.
Rud, what are you hearing through the grapevine about McMillan?
I believe there's a bit of a focus on size in pre-season, a little less running, a little bit more focus on putting a bit of bulk on the players. That they played they trained very fast. That was kind of a big staple of the round 3 thing, and they picked up a lot of soft tissue injuries, and they never quite admitted that there was one thing was leading to another. But there was definitely a sense that they were kind of almost replicating the Stuart Lancaster Leinster days. And McMillan's come in with his own S&C coach, so there's a bit of alignment there. So what he wants from the players, he's putting in place, and we'll see if that slows them down or whether it results in a more formidable forward pack or more formidable ball carrying across the season. Like the early signs are, and they often are when a new coach comes in, it's all pretty positive. He does arrive with a big reputation. You don't, he's coached the Chiefs in 2 Super Rugby finals, coached the New Zealand Maori. He has worked with some superb players I know the Super Rugby is not the competition it was, but he's been head of an organisation that have been consistently market leaders there. Maybe not market leaders, the Crusaders are obviously the top dogs, but they're very close to it. And has a bit of sternness and a bit of toughness as a former police officer. That maybe he's going to take a bit of a tough love approach, and I think he needs to galvanise a squad that's lost the spiritual leader of the last decade. And I don't think you can underplay how important Peter O'Mahony's been to Munster, even if he was disenfranchised the last couple of seasons and had kind of his own frustrations. That I wonder will I would imagine his views would mirror Conor Murray's closely enough. If he ever brings out a book, I'd say he has similar frustrations. I've spoken to him once or twice about how he feels about his Munster career, and it was always a real sense that this was going to be the one thing that hung over it a little bit, that he never, obviously captained to a URC, but that they never played in the European Cup final, and that he wasn't able to carry that legacy that he grew up watching, and that's been a big part of it. So whenever they have this Access Munster thing, and if you watch it's behind the scenes stuff, and you watch the pre-match huddles, Tyke Byrne speaks and then he hands over to O'Mahony. Like, O'Mahony has been the voice for so long. They're incredibly reliant on Tyke Byrne. He played more than, apart from the Saracens players, Maritoje, he played more last season than any of the Lions. He will have to be minded at this stage of his career. They can't have him as much as they have had. I just can't see him playing the volume of games. But Munster needed him last year over and over and over again. They'll need to find a way to win without him, and he is so crucial on those big days. I mean, you're looking at the Ireland players not really being, the Lions, and this will affect Leinster more than it does Munster or Ulster or Connacht, but not being involved really until December. I think they might have one game before December. So you might be losing 12 players at Leinster, but with Munster you're losing the talisman in that pack, and by far their most influential and important player. And I guess what you're looking to is Jack Crowley to step up and fill that void, and Casey as well, but Crowley in particular, kind of bouncing back from a really difficult season for club and country last year. And there's indications that he's put a lot into this pre-season, that he went and got his own S&C coach for his summer holidays and didn't really take any time off, in terms of he wanted to bounce into this season, and he wants that 10 jersey back for Ireland, and that's going to be one of the big interesting things we're going to be watching in the first couple of months of the year.
Yeah. Okay. Such an interesting season for Munster. Just when you were talking there about different styles of play, it did the Rob Penny chapter in the book. I don't know if you chatting about that, but it was funny, and even he was laughing about it, because like, this is the thing: new coach, new kind of culture, but also new style of play. And Rob Penny we're going to go from touchline to touchline in as few passes as possible. So if you're a scrum half and you're flinging the ball 20 metres and having to get to the next ruck, this is not pleasant. And in his first Penny game, he almost cried with how tired he was. But the problem was, baked into the plan, there's an understanding, well, the scrum half is not going to get to every ruck in this plan. If that happens, the number 10 goes in as scrum half and you go as first receiver. Fine. But after 3 games, Conor Murray realised, my number 10 is Ronan O'Gara. He's just telling me to fuck off. Rog, will you go in? No? Okay. Oh, it's cruel.
It was mad thinking back to that. It was such a drastic change when Penny came in. Like, that was tearing up the identity. Like, there was no kind of middle ground, or this is another way that we can potentially play. And yeah, it was crazy thinking back. Remember, Donegal Callahan he spent a lot of time on the wing, and yeah, it was mad. I'd say it was torture for poor Murray to run that system. Yeah.
And like, he got them to 2 European Cup semi-finals, but
was the Harlequins one where they tossed out the game plan?
Yeah,
the O'Connor one.
Like, it had, because they still had that, and Murray points to that Ulster quarter-final in particular. I think that was the year before, under Tony McGann, I think. But that period for O'Mahony and Murray and Earls, when they look back to it, when they had the tail end of the greats and they didn't quite get it done, had they gone for a more suitable coach. And Penny has had success elsewhere. It's not like he's a bad coach, but he came in and just tried to change, and against the wishes of the players, and he feels he was shafted by Munster. I've spoken to him about it on the record, but had they gone with a more aligned coach to what they wanted to do, what could they have achieved? Yeah. But they made that decision, and then that was the beginning of well, maybe it started under McGann, but
even Van Gran, having left Munster, he's had great success at Bath. I think the one coach that I would say that they were really gutted to lose, it was Razzie.
Oh yeah, they felt they were going places.
Like, they were, and like I think that I saw a quote saying he was their Alex Ferguson. They felt like they had their man. He suited the culture. The players really respected him, liked him, but by all means, he could read them the riot act, and they were okay with that because they knew that the direction that they were heading in. They didn't have that with some of the other coaches.
It's more that when Razzie left, and sorry, that's absolutely true, and Murray outlines on his book. But when Razzie left, they didn't replace him with another Razzie. They replaced him with Johan van Graan, who even in terms of job title, Razzie was director of rugby, Johan van Graan was head coach. They went from identifying that their model was weak, so they needed a director of rugby style figure. And then when he left after 1.5 seasons, they decided we won't have a director of rugby anymore. We're going to have a head coach who's completely new. Didn't even have a Wikipedia page when he got the job. He was basically trying to do the job of Rassie Erasmus and Jacques Nienaber, and in his first job with in a new country where he had no reputation. Surely he needed a Razzie, wherever you get him, and a sporting director type figure, but they've just changed their model. And they've never really, Ian Costello's there now, but he's not really a Razzie Erasmus style figure. He is trying to run the whole shop and take some of the responsibility away from Macmillan. But he's not, he'd say it himself, he's not Razzie. Yeah. So, I mean, there's not many Razzies going around. If there were, it'd be a very interesting world. But they're like that lurch from, well, we have Anthony Foley, he's not experienced enough. We're going to get this really experienced director of rugby figure. He's going really well. When we replace him, we're going to get this guy who has no head coaching experience, and we're not going to give him any support from above. That speaks to, I think, what Murray and Earls and all these guys are going to be frustrated with. It's not necessarily, look, it doesn't come across that, like Murray isn't that impressed with Van Graan as a whole, but at the same time, I think that the organisation could have given Van Graan a bit more support along the way. And hopefully this guy, Macmillan, is more of a, I think he's more of a Razzie style in terms of his presence. He's a big man. He's got a fair bit of experience. I think he's been touted as a future All Blacks coach. I mean, they might be looking for a coach in the next while. You never know, and he might be on the list of people and heading back a bit like Razzie was. But you just hope they've got this one right, because there's a nice bit of alignment between the Chiefs and Munster. Like they're I think culturally there's not, like, they're both. There's a bit of similarities there, so there'll be things he can tap into, I think, that will help them along the way.
A chip on the shoulder.
There's big clubs up the road with probably better resources. They're always swimming against the tide. They're a rural club. It's definitely a bit more alignment than, say, bringing in a star from the Auckland Blues, for example.
Yeah. Okay. Leinster then. So you were at an open training session today in Greystones.
Greystones, yeah.
What do I lead with when I remind you of their season last year? Won the URC or lost the Champions Cup semi-final? That's the...
Won the URC, come on.
Fine.
Gotta keep it positive.
I tell you what Leo Cullen brought up as soon as we asked him to reflect on last season, and it wasn't
the semi-final.
URC, yeah.
Oh, really?
Oh, it was the semi-final.
Was it? Oh, well, I mean...
That's what he's still thinking about.
Okay, there we go. So, Champions Cup semi-final defeat against Northampton, 37 points conceded. Having shut out Quins in Glasgow, you can forget that as well. They nilled them. It was just so. And of course, did win the URC, topped the table rather, and then won against the Bulls at Croke Park 32-7. Very comprehensive. So I guess then what? Bulk suppliers to the Lions, they're all back. You said so. A lot of these players aren't going to be in action again until December, realistically. Jacques Nienaber has signed a contract extension until 2027. Cullen had already signed one. As of the rest of the coaching staff, the likes of Blindell and McBride. On Nienaber signing, there had been some, like, again, because we're working off snippets a lot, but just the sense it wasn't the happiest of camps. You talked about that on the podcast late last season. But also when Nienaber after the Northampton game was doing press conferences and saying things like, well, look, I've nothing to do with psychology. I just coach defence, and that everything else nothing to do with me. That felt a little not like we're all in this together kind of thing, especially because when you watch him in the documentaries, he's psychology is one of it. Everything he does is psychological.
Yeah. So
I wouldn't say, oh my God, I'm shocked he signed another contract, but I suppose there was always the theory cooking away that he'd be back to go for another World Cup.
And as I understand it, he signed it towards the end of last season, so it's released this week, but he committed back then.
So it wasn't much ado about nothing, maybe.
Yeah, there's a bit of 2-2 stuff because every time the South Africa have a bad result, the call goes out from South Africa. We need Jacques Nienaber back, and Jerry Flannery, to me, seems to be doing a very good job there. But obviously, he's come from the outside, and he's not Jacques Nienaber, who's a national figure in South Africa. So there's a bit of that. There's always been this kind of murmur or suspicion that Nienaber was here to learn everything he could about the Irish system and then take it back to win the World Cup in 2027.
I think we're giving ourselves a bit too much credit there.
Maybe.
If you were going to send him out, you might send him somewhere else.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I suppose based on the last World Cup cycle, maybe. But he like I think he really likes living here. I think he's at a stage in his life where he didn't want to do the international thing where you're in camp for so long. You know, with Leinster, it is a day job. Like I know they're in South Africa for the first 2 weeks of the season, but your travel is largely the weekends. You have time with a team. He enjoys working with the players that he's working with. You know, he's working with largely the Irish players, plus Orgy Slimane, Rabah Slimani, and Rico Ioane, and all the just looking at the teams. Like they 3 teams operating on the pitch in Greystones today. All 3 of them would have a chance of winning the URC. Like the quality they have in that squad, it must be, as a coach, it must be a pretty good environment to spend your time. So yeah, he signed up and they're all in on him and he's all in on them, at least until 27, which is going to be a really interesting pinch point because Andy Farrell's up in 27, Stuart Lancaster's up in 27, Nienaber's up in 27, Leo's up in 27, Ronan O'Gara's up in 27. So I think we're going to have a lot of coaching chat between 26 and 27. But like that, it makes sense to bring them all into line as well, and kind of that would be a full World Cup cycle of Jacques Nienaber being a Leinster coach. And I guess the proof will be in the pudding this season. Can they back up their URC win and can they take the next step? Because year 3 is often when a coach kind of fully gets the ball.
Yeah. Any walking wounded post lines, or what's the word?
Yes, it is coming out this afternoon. Hugo Keenan is going to miss the first half of the season. He's had hip surgery on a long-standing issue, and Joe McCarthy, that foot issue that kept him out of the second and third lines test, it forced him off after 41 minutes of the first test. That is, he's had a setback there, and it sounds like he's a doubt for November. Or certainly he won't play between now and Chicago, so he'll obviously be a big loss. Caelan Doris, they expect to have him back by November. He is working his way back. I didn't see him out there today, but there was a lot of players, but I didn't. Most of the lines nearly all the lines were out there. I don't expect them to travel to South Africa for the first 2 games, but I think the players who are on the Ireland tour will. But as I said earlier, round 4 is against Munster. I think most of the Ireland starters who will play in Chicago will play in that game. They fly to Chicago that Tuesday or Wednesday. They will not be available for round 5, and then the next game is Chicago, which is in round 5 or round 6, essentially the 6th week of the season. So, it's a really, because they had so many lines. I think he said they had 24, 25 players in international rugby that summer, if you include Slimani and Slimane, who they won't get back for a while, and Ioane won't arrive till after November. That is to integrate that chunk of players back in the first 4, 5, 6 weeks of the season is a massive logistical challenge for Leo Cullen, and really their aim is to just accumulate as many points as possible from that window, so that by the time the Six Nations is over, they're in a good position to go and finish as high up the table as possible. And there's a real opportunity for someone else to get a fast start on them and maybe top the table and place a bit of doubt on them having that home run that they always have.
So I guess the only question really is the legacy of the Northampton defeat, because through much of last season, Ian, they were superb. Jordy Barrett was phenomenal. Their defence was nailing teams in knockout European games. Northampton happens, it's inexplicably terrible. You know, it's not just Barrett on the bench and they didn't, conceded 37 points. It's the nature of some of those tries conceded, like kick chases from minute 1 being like abysmal, by their standards. And then the postscript to that is cranky with the media. It was like mean Leinster. It was kind of siege mentality Leinster, and they win the URC. So where are they?
Look, it was a big blot on the copybook, and you've listed off all the things that went wrong, and even to have got themselves back into the game and given themselves an opportunity to win it, but their heads were gone at that stage, and they were thinking we need to win it within 80 minutes. Had they just got that game to extra time, they would. I'm very confident that they would have got over the line.
I forgot the penalty. Yeah.
Look, I was delighted to see Nienaber staying on. I'm a big advocate of his defensive system, and I'd love to see Ireland employing a very similar system and going with a harder, higher press. Seeing South Africa at the weekend, how effective that defensive system is in not allowing New Zealand's attack to breathe. I think the key for Leinster winning Europe this year is having a 10 to be able to direct them around the pitch and being defensively sound in that number 10 slot, and that's going to be most likely Prendergast, potentially Harry Byrne, and And look, a year as a 22-year-old is a long time. You have a full pre-season, lots of time to think and have different conversations that you would have week to week in season with coaches. In pre-season, you can kind of take a more reflective view. You can trial different things in training, different techniques and how to tackle, how to work with your players inside and outside you. And look, I'd be very confident that Leinster are going to be competing at the top table of Europe. The way that the competition is set up, they should win all their group games, which should give them a clean run through to the semi-final with a home last 16 and a home quarter-final. And as we've seen now, you're competing against the likes of Toulouse, Bordeaux, La Rochelle, maybe the Bulls, or whoever's top table in the Premiership, most likely Bath, and you've got to be effective on the day. And they've done it the hard way the last few years. Maybe this is the year that they can get it right on the day and find a way to win.
Like through much of last year, I felt, this is the year everything just looked right, and then Northampton happened. So now I'm standing back. I'm like, you can't be sure of anything with this team on the big day anymore, despite what they might say. It's like Northampton has kind of spooked my faith in them, and until they win it now, like there's now something legitimately wrong there.
Well, I guess what they would point to is the fact that when it got to the URC final, they delivered everything they wanted to deliver. So that was and against a good Bulls team who played terribly on the day, but in front of Croke Park.
That doesn't. So I don't buy that.
No,
not really. It's not.
And then 12 of them went off and won a line series, albeit under Andy Farrell, who often gets results with them, and they haven't got those results for Leinster over the last couple of seasons. I guess the thing is, we know there's going to be a big day, so the whole season is going to be counting down to that big day. We didn't expect the big day to be Northampton this year. We were expecting it to be against Bordeaux and Cardiff a few weeks later.
But would you be confident now on a big day they're primed to deliver? Like, how could you be?
I think with that though, I think like if you go back to the Toulouse final, that was actually a good performance.
Sure.
Yes, there was mistakes in it, but it was a good performance. What was even the La Rochelle one, while it was very disappointing second half, they performed very well in the first half to have built up that lead. What was just so disappointing about Northampton was it was just so far off their basic level. And do I see that happening again this season? No, I don't. But could Toulouse or Bordeaux beat Leinster in a semi-final or a final this year? Yes, they could, because they're an unbelievably good side. Leinster will have to be at their very best to beat the likes of those in the semi-final and final.
And obviously they could come a cropper in the pool stages. I mean, they do have La Rochelle at home. La Rochelle look like a better team this year. They've got Garrick on board. Bayonne away in the final pool game could be tricky, especially if Bayonne have something to play for, and then you could end up on the road. Do I have faith? Yeah, these players, I have huge faith in them. I don't know why they haven't pulled it together to win, done enough to win one of these finals. They did enough to win both finals against La Rochelle and just squandered it in the last in the second half of both games. And then the Toulouse one, they're in a position to win the game with a minute to go. The drop goal veers wide and they just fell apart in extra time. And they were really scrambled in the picture between the full time and extra time was just one of mayhem. Like, there was coaches everywhere. There was little pockets of groups, and Toulouse were far more kind of together, and it just seemed like a way more organised, and that was reflected in the performance. But of course, I think they can win the European Cup.
You're not undermining your point with everything you just said there. When you lay all that out, that's like,
yeah. But I've seen these players win. Like, I've just seen most of these players combined score a last minute try to win a line series in front of 90,000 people. They're not, and I do. While I do have reservations about the coaching structure, I do think that Jacques Nienaber is one of the best coaches in the world. And if he's given his head and he is allowed, and I think he is most of the time, but even within games, I think he needs to be more in charge of the strategy and all of that sort of thing. I think Leo needs to step back a little bit and let Nienaber run it even more. I know he's driving things quite a lot, but I do think there are factors with Leinster, like the selection, and whether the decision to leave Jordy Barrett out was driven by Leinster or driven by Ireland. I suspect Ireland was the real reason that Jordy Barrett didn't start that game. Like, are they fully in control of things? Like, they did probably for a semi-final. They need to go F off Ireland. We're picking our All Black, who just was man of the match in the last game. So there are factors with Leinster that do make it harder. But the players, like the 23, they'll be able to put out for games. Look, there's risks. Prendergast goes down, Tyke Furlong goes down. these are things that Andrew Porter goes down. Like
Sure.
some of the lines might have hangovers. That's quite conceivable that they're not going to be as good this year as they often are because they've had a big summer and it's gone deep. And they've lost McCarthy and Keenan for a chunk of the season. Excellent players, starters. But they have the squad. Yeah, I still think they can win it. I would have. Of course I would not. My confidence has definitely been affected in them. But by far and away, they are the Irish team. They're the only Irish team, I think, realistically, who can win silverware.
Oh, listen, and there's a fair chance they go into Europe as the favourites. It's just the Northampton thing was so strange. I think you look at it and go, oh,
Yeah, but it's a new dawn, new day, and wow. They'll have parked it by the time it comes round. And if they face Northampton in a semi-final, I would have a huge faith that they would put them away. It's the 50-50 against the Bordeaux and Toulouse that and the Toulon are coming back. La Rochelle will be stronger this year. There are better teams. I think it's probably a little bit of a stronger field this year in Europe. So that will, and Bath I think will be a player in Europe this year. So it's not as straightforward. I think that's what made last year even more jarring. Like Dupont was gone. There was no Dupont for Toulouse. Like Toulouse were someone else took to the equation. Yeah. They didn't have to. So it's
no, and even like playing Bordeaux in the final, like. If it had been Leinster or Bordeaux in the final, you're going to back the side who's been to the final 4 of the last 5 years against a side that's there for the first time and who also struggled when they were in their last final, which was the top 14 final before last season. They got blown away by Toulouse. Now, full credit to them. They bounced back this year and were very competitive. But yeah, it was could not have been better set up for Leinster this year. To have won it, and it's going to leave a deep scar, and the only way that scar heals up is by winning it.
Yeah, I've gone too long on Munster and Leinster as I knew I would. Let's rather than do a poor job on Connacht and Ulster, let's start with them in the next week or so when we're previewing the season. Might be better. Give me a quick word on the Rugby Championship, which looks to be the best edition in years.
Yeah, it's been amazing. Like even just to look at the table and see that everyone's won 2 out of 4 games.
Yeah, so Australia 11 points, South Africa, New Zealand 10 apiece, Argentina 9. Everyone's won 2, lost 2. 55 tries in 6 games. I guess this New Zealand South Africa tit for tat over the last couple of weeks has really kind of captured the imagination. There was Eden Park, South Africa there for the first time in 13 years. Could they win? They couldn't. So for New Zealand, that was 50 wins and 1 draw in the professional era. And then they moved to Wellington, and South Africa in return beat them 43 points to 10, record breaking. The second half in particular is being talked about as just a frightening level. I've just seen highlights and between the pace and the power and the skill, it is a frightening cocktail. Tony Brown, 18 months in, starting to work his magic. And like for an aging side, quote unquote, Colby scores 2, looks as good as ever. Khaleesi for Colby's second try looked amazing. That's not the guy the Racing president was talking about. Williams had a great game. He got a try. Quagga Smith, Orgy Snyman, Manny Libbok amongst the tries as well. So what did we see here from South Africa in this second half, in particular, kind of 2 years out from World Cup territory?
Look, to be beaten in Eden Park, they played really poorly. But they very much got on top for the final 20 minutes of that game, and they would have taken a lot of confidence going into the Wellington game from that. In the first half, New Zealand were at their very best. They played really, really good rugby. They scored an amazing try.
Leroy Carter one was champagne rugby.
Champagne rugby. Could be try of the season. The turning point in that first half, it looked like they were going to score another try, and Colby pulled off a phenomenal piece of defence. He literally uses his footwork to feign a tackle and then step off his right foot or off his left foot and goes for the intercept, one-handed, goes the length, 14-point turnaround. South Africa then come out after half-time, score again to take the lead. And for New Zealand to have played at their very best for 40-odd minutes, 43, 44 minutes, to be down in that game is just heartbreaking. And South Africa broke their soul in that second half. Like, they just blew them off the park. Their ability to kick accurately, and I'll dive into the box kick and the impact that it's having on the game, in particular in the Rugby Championship. They won the ball in the air, they won the physical battle, they won the battle on the ground. Their scrum was excellent. They completely dismantled the New Zealand line out. And I came away after that game and it's been hard to kind of get a gauge on South Africa and where they're at, and New Zealand, because they've both been inconsistent. But I came away from that and just thinking of the depth that South Africa have and the style of play and the Tony Brown factor of having another way of winning, as opposed to just this kind of power game. And I just thought, this is the squad that's going to win the next World Cup. Age profile, depth, and just the style of play was particularly impressive. And to dive into the box kicking, Reinach is an excellent box kicker of the ball, but the rule change of no escorting. It's always going to take a little bit of time for teams to figure it out. But the box kick, in my opinion, is arguably the biggest weapon at the moment. And if you can have a 9 that accurately box kicks the ball 20 to 25 metres, and you have wingers who can chase well and come up with one of 4 things. You either get up and win the ball clean, you're then attacking against a disjointed defence. You get up, you create breaking ball. Ideally, your team wins that breaking ball. You're then attacking against unstructured defence again. You create breaking ball, you lose it, but you smash the opposition. You create really slow ruck ball. Or you send the ball up and you make a dominant tackle, ideally as close to the touchline as possible, slow that ruck ball down. And then there's nowhere for the opposition to go. They can only carry the ball, ideally get it back to the gain line, and they're going to have to kick it back to you. The teams who've won each of the games in the Rugby Championship, they've won it because they've won that aerial battle. And I think I know we're previewing the URC, but teams who can accurately box kick and get their chasers up at the ball are going to be very competitive in the URC this year, regardless of other players in their teams.
Pick up on that point about South Africa, favourites for the World Cup. Strong favourites?
I think France are right in that mix, and we just haven't seen them for a while. But even the fact that they sent over their second string to New Zealand and were very competitive in July, they're the 2 teams with the most high-end players available to them, and that obviously is a massive thing at a World Cup. But what I like about what South Africa put out last Saturday was that while you've mentioned a couple of senior players there, this was kind of Kane and Moody moving into the 13 channel and starring in a big international game, a player that we've heard about, we've seen in the URC, but I've never really seen him put it together like that. Ethan Hooker, 22-year-old winger, slaloming from inside his own half and skittling All Blacks out of his way. He's huge. He can play 13 as well. And new front rows. We're not looking at the same faces in the front row. Etspet's not involved. Dielende's not involved. Those players are not retired. They'll come back and they'll have to fight hard for their jersey now. And I think what Rassie Erasmus has done in a much better way than Ireland have done so far is that he has replenished and reinvigorated an aging squad. I mean, the Springboks, their whole project, 2019 was a bonus. It was all about 23. And they picked off 2019 on the way to 23, but that team was always planned to peak in 23. And now, Nienaber moves on. He goes and gets Brown. He gets Felix Jones back from England. He's got Jerry Flannery there. He's refreshed it, and he's re-energized the team by picking some younger players. He starts Sasha Feinberg Mngomezelu, who was playing really well before Libbok comes on. And Libbok, he's been a bit of a laughing stock at times because of his kicking, and here he is running the show away to New Zealand and looking super confident. He's still got Handré Pollard. He's playing with the Bulls this season. He'll be a bit more minded than he has been the last couple of years. Sure, if they need to kick a winning goal in the World Cup final, they've no better man, and he'll be part of that squad as well. But if he makes it that far, if the other 2 haven't finished him, so they have pushed the button. They've endured some pain. They've lost to Australia. They've lost to New Zealand this year, but they're coming out of it able to do what they did, make a statement in Wellington. And I mean, I don't know if you've watched any of the New Zealand media coverage since. It's basically, we're back in 2022 when Ireland won the series. They're talking, the breakdown this week is somewhat like just it's existential stuff. And Scott Robertson's suddenly under pressure, and the senior players are under pressure, and Scott Barrett needs to be dropped, and it's just it's massive.
There's guys saying we have to stop our coaches going abroad. Like there's all everything's on the table.
Yeah, so you've just basically struck a real blow into one of your rivals, and the great thing is we're going to see New Zealand in Chicago. We're going to see South Africa here. We'll get a real gauge of where Ireland are against them. But I do think you look at the way this seems to me like this next 6 months is a big window for Ireland to pivot towards that World Cup and find some new blood and just bring that age profile down and reinvigorate things. And you can see the reward. There might be pain. It might not be a great November, but you got to do it at some stage if you're going to arrive at that World Cup ready.
Okay. Just to mention before we wrap, congratulations to Lynn Cantwell, announced she's going to be inducted into the World Rugby Hall of Fame. This will be on the eve of the Women's World Cup final. Ireland's most cap player ever, 86 caps, and obviously Six Nations winner, was part of that World Cup semi-final team and currently head of women's strategy for the IRFU. So big congrats to her. And then I guess there is always this cloud over the game at the moment. Paul Willemse has announced his retirement from the game at the age of 32 owing to multiple concussions. So he wrote a statement and just said, look, he wanted to keep going, but he can't. He's had quite a lot of them. Didn't put a number on them, but he's only 32 and he's having to bow out. And I suppose this has been the summer in some respects where Shane Christie died aged 39, had spent a long time campaigning about brain injuries in rugby, wants his brain studied after his passing. You know, was fairly sure between memory lapses and speech problems and depression and mood swings he had CTE, and so I presume his brain is being examined. But that is, for all of the many exciting things, that is always the ongoing subplot in rugby. And you know, Willemse, only 32, gone. And
I should say, kind of tangentially to that, Gary Ringrose and James Ryan were both out training today with Leinster. They've both been to see the specialist, I think it's the guy in Birmingham that everyone goes to now. They're both players who have a history, and obviously Gary Ringrose, incredibly courageous act of self-reporting during the lines and taking himself out of the equation for a test, was a shining example of kind of the way players are approaching it now. Certainly within, I think Leinster have been kind of best in class in some ways at dealing with this over the last couple of years when it comes to Doris, James Ryan, Ringrose being stood down for periods to try and get it right. But yeah, for them, so like, Willemse is such the kind of profile of player that could have shrugged on to 37, 38, earning big money in France, Japan, where, you know, go back to South Africa, play a bit of URC. So obviously he's taken the advice.
Maybe 10 years ago he does.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm getting at. So I think attitudes are changing, but the issue remains as prevalent as ever. But the vigilance is far greater, and the players, I think we saw through Ringrose, the players, and even Willemse doing it, you know, taking himself out of the equation, are far more aware of it. And even Leo Cullen was saying, when we asked him about the two lads who won't be in South Africa, I think, but will play early in the season, and you know, I was a bit worried about the two of them coming out of the Lions tour. Sorry, I was worried about the two of them coming out of the Lions tour, but he was just saying, like, it's all about tackle tech. It's all about we work on their technique. They created the role of contact skills coach to coach players to be more dominant, but also to be less injured and not to get themselves in that position. And I think that has been that has got results for them, even though players are always going to get head injuries in a sport as violent as rugby.
Yeah. I'm sure you've thought about it long and hard. There is no way to eradicate head knocks in rugby. It's just there's too much going on. There's heads, there's knees, there's different heights, there's speed. In tackle technique, generally, getting head right side of body and all that kind of stuff, is the game generally pretty good, or you still would you watch an average game and, I don't know, however many times a game, would you still think, oh, geez, you got your head the wrong side there, man?
Yeah, I think tackle technique it has improved over the last couple of seasons. I think as well with the actual rules around, or the laws around, high tackle. You know, coaches, regardless of concussions or not, they're going, well, we don't want to give away penalties and yellow cards, so tackle height has to come down. I think for me, there still is a few areas that the game can improve. Players leading with the forearm or leading with the elbow into contact, and if you're traveling at 9-10 meters per second and you tackle someone's quad, your head's going to be fine. If you hit into their elbow or their forearm, you're going to know all about it, especially if it's into the side of your head. That's something I'd like to see refereed closer.
You've been banging on that for a few years now.
I am, and I'll continue to bang on until I see it refereed properly, and players who do lead with that arm being, you know, refereed appropriately, and it's just a frustration of mine. I think the other big one for me within the head contact one, and I've seen this referee different in the Rugby Championship, is if a ball carrying player dips late and there is head contact, it's not the yellow card that we were seeing last season. Okay, so what that is telling us is it is not just on the tackler. It's not just the tackler's responsibility to avoid head contact. It is also the ball carrier's responsibility. And this late dip or late folding and being reckless with your head in the carry, you're no longer going to be rewarded for it. So that's positive. The final one, and you've both said it, there will still be head injuries in rugby. And sometimes the worst ones are when two defending players clash heads with each other, right? it is standing players down for a sufficient period of time. Where we're seeing this like CTE or like long-term concussion injuries, the data is showing that it's when players come back too soon. So, look, regardless of what level of the game you're playing at, boys and girls, take a period of off. Like, it should be treated like a broken bone, where you've got a month period to step down.
See, I thought that sort of was happening, and it's the subconcussive blows which can just rack up without you fully realising, which are the other silent killer. There's no easy answers.
No, like even practicing your tackle tech and hitting bags. Like, I remember doing that, and you'd be seeing stars afterwards, but you wouldn't think a whole lot of it because like there's actually no head contact.
Yeah.
But you're you're milling into the pad so hard that your brain's probably hitting against the top of your skull.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's not easy. Let's wrap this up. We'll pick up in the next week or so. Connacht and Ulster fans, I promise you we will start with you guys next week. I just didn't want to do 5 minutes and then move on. So we'll do proper chat about both clubs either next week or the week after, depending on availability. Good to see you again. Thank you for coming in. And Ian Madigan, pleasure. Great to have you in studio.
Yeah, thanks.
See you in studio again, maybe November if we're lucky.
I'll be in more this year. That's a promise.
No. All right. Cheers, guys.